the brilliant thing about retention and CRM teams and the platforms that exist is I've got the ability and permission to have an individual one-to-one conversation with me as brand or merchant and you as Rich or Ad or Matt or Jenna or whomever. And yeah. I think that paralyzes some of the teams because they realize, hang on, this is really big. I do want to try and create that personal experience. So then what happens is perhaps they go, oh, we can't, we'll just keep it generic. We'll do welcome flow, abandoned cart, and maybe we'll do ad hoc emails when we've got something to say, new product launch and offer goes live. And there's no, then I think that's typically where we meet a lot of businesses, and they don't then think about structuring their team and their tools in a way to look at segmentation properly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode where I'm together with Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
So let me introduce you, Richard, to our audience. What I know and what I think are the highlights of your experience so far is that you've helped grow 3 unicorns profitably. Among them, Gymshark. You've been the CMO of a lot of companies, and you are now the head of growth at the Growth Foundation. So that being said, unveil a bit about your experience, because
no problem. So actually my retail career started 30 years ago this year. I started on the shop floor in home improvement here in the UK at a brand called Homebase. So your UK listeners will know that brand. It's a household brand. Started off part-time, stacking shelves, general, work in the retail store. Actually fell in love with working in retail. I really enjoyed it. Perhaps looking through rose-tinted spectacles now a little, but I learned a lot about sort of great retail disciplines and getting the basics right in physical retail. Got distracted trying to become a rock star. You can see I've got some guitars behind me in my younger days. And obviously didn't quite make it because here I am talking about retail marketing. But then actually ended up for a short time in a record label in the early 2000s. And actually was really hard back then to find a job that would actually pay good money. So I thought I'll go and earn my marketing stripes somewhere else and come back into industry. I went actually to another home improvement business called Carpet Right here in the UK. Worked as a junior marketer to maybe mid-level over 4 years. And then I fell into my first fast growth direct-to-consumer brand called Play.com. So I was there from around 20 million to 500 million in 4 years. In the weeds of execution, building a team and trying to hold on to grow, to growing with that brand. And I then joined a business called THG, the Hut Group, who I'm sure you guys will have heard of, and joined that business at around a similar time, around 10 million, on a journey with those guys to around 350 over about 4 years. And then went into lifestyle consultancy and portfolio. That's when I met Gymshark. So I did that sort of advisory and interim CMO in that business from 8 million to 200. And through learning a lot by doing the growth and being there, building the teams, the processes, working out the mix of, media channels. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot today about customer lifetime value and how that's important, both for obviously profitability and contribution of your business, but how you use the information to and that revenue and profit that you drive from that lifetime value to acquire more customers. That was obviously done in all of those businesses, and taking that pattern recognition. And now I run with my incredible team of nearly 30 people at Growth Foundation. We have 3 sort of products and services here. We have a consulting and advisory business helping people grow the right way, and really think of it like maybe if you think about that as I have this analogy that I use around talking about the Karate Kid movie. So we imagine our clients to be Daniel, the high potential hero of the future at the beginning of the movie, and we are the e-commerce growth Mr. Miyagis.
Mr. Miyagi, exactly.
Yeah, we're the guides. We've been there. We've won the championships previously, and now we're helping the teams in the brands sort of learn how to do it, mentoring, coaching, advising. We then have a recruitment business, so we spend a lot of time, usually around 30 to 50 hires per month that we put in from manager to director in those types of businesses. And then finally, we have a fast growing but very early stage conversion rate optimization app called Order Rescue, which helps merchants convert more orders in the checkout specifically. It just looks at the checkout and how to get better flow through the checkout. So yeah, we're very busy, as you can imagine, and the sort of perfect, I suppose, type of brand or team that we would talk to is usually around a couple years in, maybe have got out of the bedroom, they're starting to scale and become professional. And then the founder or the senior team realize, hang on, we can see great potential in our business, but we're not quite sure where to go. A bit like a Daniel, right? What do I do? How do I win the championship? And that's what we're up to. Yeah. Hey, hi, Matt. I can just see someone waving at me. It's one of my team. Hey, Matt.
So, Richard, you've done a ton. And first of all, congrats. You've done so many things up until this point. Tell me how you see lifetime value, because our mission here is to democratize the usage of customer lifetime value and to help brands and agencies and experts optimize the customer lifetime value, not only monitor it, not only doing this type of ad hoc measurement from here and there. How do you see lifetime value? How have you been leveraged it in your past experience?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I imagine you guys will talk about this a lot. Maybe share some frustration I have with the lack of, I suppose, market-wide definition of lifetime value. You know, you meet different brands and different product sectors and all those things, and each brand I've ever met has a different maybe definition of those things. I suppose when you hear when I hear the word value, instantly I think about contribution and profit. So the way that we encourage our clients and the way the team works here is thinking of customer lifetime value as it's a profit number. So usually we would look at, and again, sort of strap in everyone. This is a sort of a formula that we will look at. So we might take a revenue, average customer revenue generated over let's say a period of time, which is variable. It could be a month, it could be 12 months, 2 years, and that will depend on the type of product. So if you're buying a sofa or flooring, that might be a 5-year view because it's a long sales cycle or lifetime purchase cycle. But if you're in cosmetics or beauty, nutrition, it might be 1 month. So we look at that average spend. We would then remove cost of goods and typically shipping and basically the cost of securing the product and getting it to the consumer. And then this is I suppose the best way. Then we look at trying to then extrapolate the potential future lifetime value of a customer is dividing that number by the percentage of customers who only buy once. So it's like dividing it by a churn. So that's typically where we would approach that from.
Mm-hmm. So, Rich, tell me a bit about the way you've leveraged that in the past.
So where we leverage it, yeah. So once you've established that metric, and perhaps we would look at maybe deconstructing that number into 2 stages. So average revenue over a period of time for a customer, removing those cost of goods and shipping and things like that. We would look at that, and obviously that's a very rational. That's what customers have generated for us. And so if you're thinking you're in a business that wants to make perhaps profit and contribution on the first order, that's the number we would look at. And then obviously you can look at that contribution that you get from a consumer and then use that to feed into, I suppose, the appetite and the budget of what you're prepared to acquire a customer for. And that's where I'm sure you guys will talk about either CLV or LTV to CAC, customer acquisition cost. And again, we will try and encourage our brands and the businesses we work with to really use that CLTV to CAC ratio as the measure of success for the sort of the acquisition and retention teams to work closely together. And usually the other thing we would do is design, when we're doing the organization design work that we do, usually we build a CRM or retention team who obsess about LTV or CLV. Again, you can see here there's not one term that's right to use, is there? Basically, to really obsess about that number. And then typically there's a performance, I suppose, an acquisition team who typically are then using, the levers that they touch are in paid media channels like Meta and TikTok. And for some other brands we work with, they may even be above the line. They might be doing billboards and other kind of broadcast media. They are then obsessed about the budget that they use to acquire a new customer. And it's the ratio of those two things. So we try wherever we can to get that ratio to be 3 to 1. So effectively, the lifetime value is 3 times greater than the cost of acquiring a customer. And anything north of that is probably getting into the realms of very good or exceptional. And brands that are obviously anything over 1 is good, because that means you're generating a net contribution to your bottom line after you've acquired the customer. So that's really how we inform it. So it becomes then perhaps for, when we're hiring a marketing director or a CMO who's responsible for both of those functions, both on acquisition and retention, that individual can be really measured on that ratio pretty much exclusively, or that's their major focus, obsessing about that. And give you an example, my time in that role at Gymshark, for example, one of a handful of board slides would be a very large CLV to CAC ratio number to share with the board and get them to think about that number a lot. Yeah.
So you've addressed something important here. It's not like so at Gymshark, at least, you haven't looked at the CLV to CAC ratio just ad hoc from time to time. You were actually monitoring it so that you know that you were on the safe side in terms of
it's monitored. I mean, in the sort of the cadence of that business when we were doing that, it was probably weekly. Daily, it's probably slightly too short of time period to look at.
Yeah, to see the
but
variation.
It would be definitely, I would be looking at the team would be very aware of that number on a weekly basis. And obviously back up, into the senior team or to the owners of the business on a monthly basis. Absolutely. It becomes like by default in the blueprint of how the team operates and talks, and in terms of measuring success. And obviously there are quite a few ways of, I suppose, starting to deconstruct CLV or LTV as well, because you can look at what's the CLV of my very best VIP soulmate customers, what's the CLV of my worst customers, or even my nursery customers. I use that terminology, that have placed their first order, and there are many different segments and cohorts all have different lifetime value. And you can imagine for a relatively simple business like Gymshark, which is maybe a few hundred to thousands of SKUs in one product category, you can kind of get some I suppose you can start to get a sense of how elastic CLV is. But if you're a brand that's perhaps like a department store, like John Lewis here in the UK, for example, you have 20,000 SKUs from baby to home improvement to, and everything in between, right? And the CLVs will be very different. So it obviously becomes much more complex and linked to products. And it all comes back to that point around understanding what the typical buying frequency, perhaps, of your customer is. And that's your benchmark, isn't it, in terms of that frequency? Yeah.
Yeah. So Rich, regarding this frequency, which is an important aspect, you've mentioned 2 things that I want to unpack. The first one is related to the fact that you are going into this direction of monitoring CLV to CAC, and you have to have some targets, right? So in order to make it, to improve it, you have to set some proper targets. How important were those targets against the revenue targets? Because, and I want to set the stage here correctly, many companies are chasing revenue or are chasing margin. God help nowadays that the balance is more towards profit rather than growth. But they are not looking at what's causing the revenue to happen, what's causing the profit to happen, which are those unit economics.
Yeah. So, I think, as always, I'm sure everyone watching or listening knows that revenue and profit usually are at the top of every dashboard, aren't they? But the way that we unpack that is, and again, the way that the team here talks about things, we talk about lead and lag measures. So if I think about revenue and profits, a lag measure, right? It's the factoring of lots of other lead measures that create that number. You meet a finance director or a founder of a business, they say, I want to grow more, I want to do more sales. And you're like, well, there's, sales, if you deconstruct sales and revenue, it's a a combination of how much traffic you get to the store, the conversion rate of that traffic, and then the average order value. You know, that's the lead measures of that lag. And CLV, as I mentioned earlier on, is that, what's that? How do you define it? What feeds it? So average revenue per customer over a period of time, takeaway, cost of goods and shipping, and that gives you a sense of that number. And I suppose that the interesting thing there is, in terms of, we would set that perhaps as, because you start to go slightly cross-eyed, don't you, when you think about, well, actually that doesn't directly relate to my revenue. What are the things that create, I suppose, you know, if you think lag measure CLV, lead measures of that on my cost of goods, my shipping costs, and maybe the amount of times that my customer spends, right? So imagine in a month, you're a beauty brand, and maybe over a 3-month period, you've set the benchmark that people should buy 2 times. So I want 2 times the average order value, take away the shipping cost of goods. So if I can reduce my cost of goods, I can reduce shipping. That's going to help my CLV. If I can get them to buy more frequently or spend more every time they come, they're the levers I can pull, I suppose. So then how do I prompt you to come again sooner? And obviously beauty is a great one when you're consuming product. It might be that I just remind you, because I can start to predict based on your behavior when you run out. So you're a heavy user of the product. So maybe I'd start creating a segment in my CRM tool to say, right, let's make sure heavy users get notified to replen sooner. And then perhaps people that don't appear to be heavy users, we need to adjust that. How do I get people to buy more when they come? And obviously that's more of a trading and on-site merchandising, visual merchandising tool, but how do you get people to have more in the basket overall? So that becomes a thing of, right, do we offer bundle offers and discounts? Do we try and get you to, you know, spend and save, or their gift with purchase? How do we get more, just more in the basket as well, right? And that kind of, and again, I suppose it's interesting there, because it's not just then the responsibility of the retention team who are really obsessed about CLV. They need to get buy-in from the product team, from the trading and visual merchandising team, you know, operations around those things to really push that up. But I think on the whole, I would say is that I suppose good, let's say MDs and finance directors or senior financial people understand that if you can generate more customer lifetime value, that pays dividends for the particularly right, like, you know, in the month, but actually looking forward to the future. So that slightly more complex definition I spoke around, where you take your CLV and then divide it by the percentage of customers who've only bought once, or that churn number, that obviously gives you a prediction of how, you know, the lifetime value. And when you say life, actually, what is the life of a customer? Are they here for 5 years, for 10 years, for 30 years, or are they here once and that's it? So it gives you a sense of looking forward. And I suppose for some brands who perhaps are looking to grow faster, or if you start to factoring and look over the last 12 months, we can see, you know, 4 purchases on average, and maybe some customers do 12, some only do 1, but 4 is the average. I can now use that, I suppose, confidence that I have in that behavior to now spend more on my CAC. So, you know, you can use some of that incremental CLV in that calculation to say, well, actually, instead of maybe trying to maintain that 3-to-1 ratio, I can, because I've increased my CLV by factoring the future, I can now spend, maybe instead of $30 acquiring a customer, I can spend 40, and that means I can reach more consumers. I can try and test different things. So yeah, it's really important. So it would be, I suppose, if I was designing we've got what we call, I suppose, our perfect dashboard here at the Growth Foundation that looks at product, brand, marketing, trading, operations, all the major functions of the business. The 2 marketing ones, as I've said to you, revenue, profit, you know, customer satisfaction are the top ones. And then in each function, in the marketing one, it's got CAC and LTV. And there are some sort of secondary ones, of course, like traffic and sort of mix of customer life stage and other things. But those 2 numbers are super important.
Yeah, got it. So if I get it correctly, and we are on the same page for sure, I'm obsessed about these things, and we're talking the same language. Companies not using CLV to CAC are shooting in the dark when they are budgeting, because they don't know how much they should be spending on acquiring a customer. So they are either underspending, so they are leaving money on the table because they are not accelerating their growth sustainably, or they are overspending, meaning that their lifetime value is not justifying such a high CAC, and they should be focusing on other products or channels which are more cost effective. And that's why they need to measure CLV and CAC, and also drill down, slice the data so that they could see which are their best performing first bought SKUs or categories or channels, right?
100%. Yeah, that kind of behavioral life of a customer is a really interesting one, isn't it? Where you say, yeah, we know hero product or first product is this, and then looking at the behavior, particularly of the better, more frequent customers. What's their second purchase? What's their third? What's their fourth? And again, are there some, perhaps you can see, hang on a second, I've got a group of customers on their seventh purchase who the majority have gone through this journey. And then perhaps there's someone on their third purchase, and you can say, I can now predict you're going to move to position 4. Could I get that to happen faster? Could I introduce that product to you as a sample or put it in your life quicker? Yeah, absolutely. You're obsessed around that. Yeah, improving. And I'm sure you've spoken about this as well. We look at one of the ways we try and, I suppose, look at CLV is that quite, I suppose, relatively simple calculation, but we will overlay or look through a different lens of recency, frequency, and monetary value. So that is the combination of how recent is someone, how frequent are they, and I suppose that monetary value point leads to CLV. They're those two other kind of key, like, cousins of that metric, recency and frequency.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
So we can get now into the RFM segmentation. So tell me what's your position about RFM in e-commerce and retail?
Yeah, it's I suppose what's interesting from my experience is that I don't think I've met maybe out of the few 200 brands I've met in the last 5 years, only a handful have presented a reasonably coherent RFM playback to us. So there's again an opportunity to use that lens to look at your data. I suppose again, it's sometimes quite difficult to visualize when you talk about methodologies of data and things like that over a conversation and try to make it accessible for the audience to listen to. But one of the things that we will do when we take a RFM, let's say, health check of a database, one of the things it's really good at, I suppose, is indexing your worst customers against your best ones. So, like that idea of, because every month or week is seasonally different. If you compare customers and their behavior in, let's say, peak trading in Q4 of a year compared to Q2, it will, those scores could be quite different. But typically what we would look at maybe is like, well, let me look at last year, score the customer database using it. We use a quintile RFM sort of analysis here. So we score everyone from 1 to 5 for recency, frequency, and monetary value. So for the listeners and viewers checking in, a 555 customer would be very recent, or the most recent, the most frequent, and the most valuable. And the 111s would be the inverse, the least recent, the least frequent, and the least valuable. So perhaps then you could think about, well, what does a first-time customer look like? So there may be a 511 or a 531, which would be, or a 533, right? Very recent, and maybe one frequency. They've only bought once, and now they may have spent, don't know, they might have spent $30 or $4,000. So you've got that ability to start thinking about the various scoring and taxonomy that you can use across customers. So it's useful perhaps to then look at last year or last 12 months, compare that to the previous 12 months and the one before that, or a period of time. And I suppose what you're looking for is more of your database in the 4s and 5s than in the 1, 2, 3s. The other thing that it does is, I suppose it starts to bring out some information around what are the average days between orders, which customer groups. I've got a small team in my marketing team. I've only got perhaps one or two people in my CRM or retention team. Where should I get them to focus on? And we kind of are quite brutal. Anyone with 1 and 2, don't bother. Like, just put them in your prospecting list. Anyone who's 5, they're probably very product sensitive and love your brand. So you could talk to them more around product and innovation and collaboration and feedback about what the brand does. Maybe the 3s and 4s are the ones in the potential to move your CLV, right? Because are you going to get much more CLV from the very best customers? Probably not. The risk is that they may stop becoming your best. How do you not offend them and make them go away? Probably the CLV growth comes from anyone with a 3 and 4 in our view. Where it doesn't become particularly useful when you look at things like that is actually running a CRM program, because it's probably better to define sort of life stages of customers in a slightly different way, right? Which might be, well, actually, nursery customers are by definition have only ordered once in the last 30 days and can spend anything. But a soulmate VIP needs to have spent, you know, $4,000, have made 12 purchases, and recency isn't an issue so much. So it's more around, but perhaps that. So yeah, and that's kind of the view. But yes, very important. And yeah, I think that probably, again, without going down a rabbit hole of RFM, that's probably a good view. But you can tell, here we go. Great to see this.
So basically, yeah, we are talking the same language, and I wanted to add some visuals over what you've been.
Brilliant.
You've been addressing, because basically that's what our bread and butter is around this RFM segmentation. So this is a short demo of how we are doing it as well. Rich, brilliant. I think it's always refreshing to see how people from different corners of this planet are eventually reaching the same conclusions and making the same processes, optimizing the same processes towards improving lifetime value. So what I want to ask, and also the parity against the worst customers, we have this in our CVO Academy. Let me show you this, because it's quite funny, because this wasn't scripted, guys, as well. So basically, it's
genuinely, we've literally come in cold with a few pointers in terms of what we're talking about. So yeah,
exactly. So basically, that's what we do as well. It's part of the academy where we are teaching people about what to do with the soulmates, for instance, and this is the parity against their worst customers, which are breakups, the 111s, right? The ones which are the worst customers. Now, Rich, I want to ask you, what do you think keeps companies from adopting this methodology? What keeps them from focusing on, because unit economics makes sense. Without doing this, you're underspending or overspending. The customer acquisition costs are through the roof. Still, there are a few companies which are going so.
Like I mentioned again, when we've met most of the merchants and clients I've met are. It's been interesting. We could probably maybe try and work together on doing more research in this space. But they appear to be overtly new customer acquisition focused, in terms of that's the path they believe that creates the growth. So we often meet businesses where you look at the organization design, there will be maybe a founder who's the product visionary. They then hired an agency thinking, I want to grow, so I'm going to go and spend more money on acquiring more customers. And of course, in the early stages of your business, if you have no customers, you need some. So the focus has to be, I suppose, overtly new customer focused. But what tends to happen perhaps is, because they get some success on that in the first year or two, they kind of get on the treadmill, and when they get busier, they're distracted with lots of all the other things that happen without running a growth brand. And I suppose the knowledge typically that we see with most founders is they don't come from a retention and lifetime value experience place. They're around, I've got a product, I want to make more customers aware of it. So usually like a performance marketing agency or paid media agency gets engaged, or even a consultant, or you build the team there. And even in businesses that we've met at 10, 20, 30 million, you might find there are 4 or 5 people or an agency doing the acquisition work, and there is a junior CRM or retention head who's maybe been told what emails to send by the founder or the product team, and there's no sophistication or little sophistication. And perhaps, I wouldn't say they're doing it on purpose. It's an unknown. So your kind of mission to democratize and get everyone aware of this is a brilliant one, and we've got the same. Definitely, we're with you to help make that louder across the industry. Usually, one of them, when we meet a business, I suppose it may sound a bit easy, but our mandatory checklist when we meet businesses is like, check CRM and RFM and CLV immediately. There's usually pots of unlocked gold sitting in this function and this space. And I think it comes down to an unknown. People just are not aware of the opportunity. I think the other point around that, if they are aware, it is quite complex, isn't it? Right? When you have to try and deconstruct the relationship with each individual customer. I suppose the brilliant thing about retention and CRM teams and the platforms that exist is I've got the ability and permission to have an individual one-to-one conversation with me as brand or merchant and you as Rich or Ad or Matt or Jenna or whomever. And I think that paralyzes some of the teams because they realize, hang on, this is really big. I do want to try and create that personal experience. So then what happens is perhaps they go, oh, we can't, we'll just keep it generic. We'll do welcome flow, abandoned cart, and maybe we'll do ad hoc emails when we've got something to say, new product launch and offer goes live. And there's no, then I think that's typically where we meet a lot of businesses, and they don't then think about structuring their team and their tools in a way to look at segmentation properly, because it sounds scary and complex. But I would say one of the things with obviously what you guys do and the brilliant platforms that exist out there like CLV and Bloomreach, it's easier than it ever has been, obviously now with how open and stitched together and well integrated tools are. If I roll back to my first e-com job at play.com, we had let's say an adequate email, I call it a gun, like the ability to fire emails out, but it had no segmentation in the tool. It had no ability to query data. There was no kind of, I suppose, that customer data platform work. So actually that RFM analysis that you guys have got in your tool, we would do manually in spreadsheets every week, get the data raw out of the e-com system, do the querying in spreadsheets, and we have to do it, Excel's only got 1 million rows. So you have to do it over multiple sheets, put it all back together, upload emails back into the email service provider, etc. So it's easier than it ever has been. So that would be a sort of a top recommendation from us always is to, I suppose, speculate in your CRM and retention team and tools, because there is unleveraged gold and opportunity in it, in my view.
Perfect. Rich, regarding the actions, tell us, or if you can share some stories, some things that you've been able to do in the past or with your current clients around the CLV work.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's have a think about some of those examples. And also I'm conscious around, confidential information and numbers. So I'm just racking my brain from what I can give some examples on. So, give you an example of that. I suppose underplaying or not knowing the opportunity in CRM overall. Even at Gymshark to some degree, giving you that, the guys had, where were we? I think they may have been on, MailChimp originally, went to Emarsys in terms of tool set. But actually, again, typical welcome flow, ad hoc emails when new products are being deployed, pretty much that's it. And then we, again, did an RFM overlay with those guys, looked at all those things and started to understand, here are the soulmates and the best customers. Here are the higher potential ones that just need pushing along more. Here are the group that have fallen out of love with you for some reason. We need to address that, or maybe not spend too much time worrying about it too much. But, so we did that process of deconstructing it and really effectively starting to build that I know where you are in your life stage with us, and then just giving you the right message at the right time. And I think not trying to get down to we have an individual conversation with 1 million customers. We'll have maybe 8 groups or segments or cohorts, and we'll just tweak the messaging slightly for those groups, deployed that. And obviously I can't tell you the number, but we went from a good, CAC to LTV to an exceptional one over about 12 months. So single digit to double digit. Right.
Yeah. And that's by focusing on the right customers and then focusing on acquiring the right customers. Right.
Yeah. And let me give you another one as well. So I suppose this is back in my THG days a little bit more. And maybe recently we've got some examples, but I can't pull any direct ones to head that I can point you to. But I suppose the importance of understanding which consumers are product sensitive versus promotion sensitive. And that's, again, brands don't do enough work on grouping those two people together, right? Because imagine if you're in a physical store and you say, right, here's a group of 50% of my customers only care about product. They care about getting it first, to be the first to have it, to wear it. They love the brand. They're in that, again, that kind of soulmate kind of area. And then I've got people who are soulmates still. They love my brand, but they maybe aren't affluent enough to be able to afford the full price product. Or actually, they just love deals. There's a deal hunting, deal hungry people. And they're happy to wait 3 to 6 months to get a price move. and obviously then it says to me, well, don't send new release full price information or emails or messages to the deal hunters. And likewise, don't sell deals with margin erosion and effectively CLV erosion to your best customers.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a real, I say it sounds quite simple, but actually virtually no one I've ever met from the first meeting does it. They don't think about the types of customers and the behaviors of the customers they have. So then, actually I've got deal hungry customers. I can be very, I suppose, scrappy, and I can really drive and trade them, because if I know they're responsive to offer codes and outlets and sales, I can do that really quietly with that group in hidden collections on websites with codes that aren't public, that are unique one use. And I can drive, extra revenue and theoretically CLV without disrupting my full price premium, buyers as well.
And it's such a simple thing to do, Richard, yet most of the brands, even big or small, they are throwing their margin on the window by broadcasting their discount, their promotion campaigns to everyone, while they are not conscious about the fact that they have very price sensitive groups of customers which are still active, and those could be addressed to, I don't know, destock the goods that they are sitting.
There's a few other, I suppose, things that we would try and overlay or tag on a profile, or maybe segments based on the RFM score, right? I suppose we've talked about that. How product and price or promotion sensitive are they? Like persona, that's one thing people don't look enough around. Obviously, you've got the things that you might be able to, like CLV, for example, can try and, I suppose, attempt to understand gender if you don't actually ask the question. So likely to be man, likely to be woman, or not, or unknown or other. That's interesting in terms of, again, how you talk to that consumer. And I suppose, imagine if you're a exclusively male product brand, but you've got 25% of your customers as females. What's going on there? Is it women wearing men's products or using them? Is it women buying them for their men in their life? Is it mums buying for their sons? So, and actually trying to think about that. And again, we've had quite a few brands that we've worked with who are really have quite a big gifting proposition. They're very beautiful gifts. And actually, again, in the CRM saying, actually, are you the buyer of a gift and not the user of the product? I would like to try and capture the user's information so I can tell them how to use it and come back and get more when they've used it. And whereas the gift buyer probably just wants to know it got there on time and they love it. So and that's an opportunity. So that's the persona one. Obviously, social demographic or gender and age information is absolutely key to overlay through that. And I suppose actually which products you're sensitive. So I think back to my department store days, like at play.com and THG, where we had multiple product categories, and which very different frequency and recency and monetary value cycles, having which, I suppose, where you've come in from. So did you come in at play.com, you bought DVD first, back in showing my age here, right? And then did you go to video games? Then did you go to music? And you'll be able to see, I suppose, there probably is some statistical probably weighting around your very best customers are more likely to buy across many product categories, but knowing which is the first, that path to higher CLV we spoke to. And again, you might have customers that just trust you for one thing. I come here for video games, don't talk to me about anything else. You actually annoy me when you try and get me to sell CDs and books and merch, right? It's trying to start to build a map of those, I suppose, those other kind of contextual segments on top of that scoring is really important. Again, what we're trying to do, and I can't think about why do you do it? It's so you know what to say and when to say it. That kind of truism in everything in when you're selling anything, the right message to the right person at the right time. And that information helps you do that.
Rich, I wanna shift gears a bit and focus a bit on the suggestion for companies willing to adopt such a methodology. What do they need? Do they need a data analyst? Do they need an agency? Do they need a consulting? Is it about the tool itself, or it's a mindset, a mentality?
I think both, isn't it? So mindset from the decision makers, perhaps depend. And this is really, I suppose, the caveat to this answer will be, it really depends on the size of the business, doesn't it? Right. So, but if we're talking perhaps in the scale up world, maybe where They've got out of the bedroom. It's not a startup with one or two, you know, a founder and some family friends. We're now in a team of maybe 10 to 50, looking to perhaps, you know, build more sophistication into every area of their business. I think it's an element of like mindset. So getting, you know, your head of finance, or the basically whoever is the power of attorney on budget, to think about the opportunity. And you're right, how rational and sensible it is to obsess about CLV and CAC, and have that as, I suppose, a lens to look through versus perhaps, you know, my marketing budget is 15% of my net revenue, which is often where people start, you know, a percentage of your revenue, but actually deconstruct that more into actually how much am I prepared to pay for a customer, a new one, and what do I want them to generate CLV over 12, 24, 36 months? You know, that's a really important thing to think about. In terms of then actually how do you operationalize it, you're absolutely right. Working on finding a good tool. And I think, you know, I spend a lot of time, and the team here, in pretty much Shopify's ecosystem. Probably 80% of our clients are in that space. And obviously they have, I suppose, a preferred or partner status with CLV, which integrates very well. And I think that's the point. The little checkpoint here is whichever platform you're using to basically generate sales through, make sure the CRM or the customer sort of, I suppose, segmentation tool you use integrates brilliantly, and the data is high quality and accurate and timely. I've spent, in my earlier days when things weren't as easy, we would spend months working on the integration alone to make sure almost in real time that what it said in my CRM tool was the same thing that it said in the CRM, or, you know, in the data.
You haven't met Omniconvert Reveal, so basically our paths weren't
well, I'm talking perhaps, you know, 10, 15 years ago, where things were more difficult and APIs were a future dream, right? Which didn't exist back then.
A feature and a width.
So then I think it's obviously, once you've got the tool, and maybe a great way to visualize this, it's a bit like use Formula One or car racing as a great analogy, because you might then find you don't need a Ferrari or, you know, a Formula One car. You just need a VW Golf, right? That's all that's good for now. It's very capable. It's efficient.
It gets
it's great
from A to B.
Value. A to B, comfortable, safe. Like, you don't need all the tools. And typically then, I suppose, is then saying, well, actually, if I maybe I wouldn't say you won't have to go and hire a Ferrari racing driver, but someone who's maybe slightly better than your tool, because often that's the way we'll try and sequence things. Is we found, and I found building the teams and running the teams I have, is that it's better to have slightly more skilled, ambitious, driven individuals who have got good tools, not like incredible tools. You can get loads out of the tool then. Often I meet businesses, and this is more in the enterprise space, larger organizations, they have Ferrari tools and then VW Golf drivers who don't know how to use the tools, right? And all the features that you have. So I think it's a slight balancing of those things. So a good tool that you can integrate quickly, and it's good, you know, cost effective. And then I would say a good, you don't need a leading edge CRM team or consultancy or even, you know, agency, in my view. It's someone who's good and understands, I suppose, that Pareto's principle of going to find the 20% of customers or opportunity that generates 50, 60, 70% of the revenue upside, right? So yeah, and I think then, depending again on your type of business and your size, you might have an owner who's happy to outsource everything to agencies and consultants. Fine. If you're more around in-housing, go and find that sort of CRM or retention talent and hire it. What's interesting, obviously, because we have a view of the talent market hiring into, you know, tens of clients on a monthly basis. The number of, let's say, good to great CRM people is low. You actually overall in the market, there aren't that many. So I think it's one of those things that you've either got to perhaps find someone with the right intellectual capacity and appetite to learn, get them around, you know, some good agencies, some good mentors and coaches and good content to allow them to grow into it. Or, you know, it's a very competitive space. You probably find there's quite a premium for CRM. And I've seen that move more than performance marketing over the last 12 months. And this may be because of the people want to optimize. You know, now there's a bit more with the recession and sort of headwinds in the economy. People are optimizing a bit more, and they're thinking, hang on, do I need to be paying another $10,000 a month to Meta and Google when I could use that money on talking to my existing customers? So I think founders and finance people are thinking slightly more, hang on a second, I've got a whole group of customers here that I don't talk to properly.
Yeah.
Let's go and get the talent. And actually, yeah, it's been, you've seen sort of CRM salaries or the market get more demand, which has created obviously then the inflation of sort of salaries and things like that in that space. So yeah, but I would imagine, you know, even I suppose, let's say a relatively commercially immature individual with a couple of years experience will make a difference to a business that doesn't do anything in their CRM or CLV now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Rich, I wanna talk a bit with you about this this matter of optimizing the channels. How are you seeing this? Is CLV so dramatically different based on the customer, the channel? Can you rely on attribution? Can you rely
question. And when are you talking about marketing channels? So Meta versus organic search versus direct load?
Yeah.
One of the challenges I see there, and we experience it here when we're working on brands directly, is I suppose the quality or complete lack of data on actually securing that referring URL or last visit before a conversion.
Yeah.
So actually then being able to see that in your CRM tool, your customer data platform, to have complete confidence that I know that customer last clicked on, let's say, a Meta ad and then converted. So it's then quite difficult. And often you might get it from some sources, and then you might have maybe 40% of your data where it's completely missing, or even maybe your technology stack is not connected, so you don't get any of that visibility. So effectively, all you see in your customer data platform or your CRM tool is, here's Rich, he bought yesterday for $100, and he bought, you know, previously to that 4 months ago for $80. It's got no idea where I came from, you know, and that's the worst place to be, I suppose. I'd be nervous about if I had really high confidence and quality of information around last click referring channel, and then we maybe need a whole new show to talk about attribution, because it's complex, right? Because it depends on, are you a first mover brand having to educate consumers that you exist, this new product has appeared, it's unique, it's come out of nowhere, it's a first mover? Are you let's say a gym brand disrupting a very large sports apparel market, and you've got something different to say? And then, as we know, depending on all of your offer architecture and brand positioning, your journey path to purchase may be very different, because you may be overly reliant and find loads of success in organic media and earned media through influencers and creators and PR, and you do very little performance paid marketing. And obviously what you would see in your data would be direct load. But under that direct load, there may be hundreds of different campaigns working offline to drive that awareness for the brand. And then I've got no idea, right? Because it's happening in real life, and I can't capture that in my data. So attribution is challenging. So it wouldn't be an area that I would take, let's say, a brand or a merchant who's on the beginning of this journey. Don't worry about last click referral attribution. Just actually do the basics in actually get your CLV established, start to think about RFM and looking at, and just look at it that way, and then inform your cost of acquisition budget. And effectively, if you've got slightly more budget, or you've got confidence on your acquisition budget, that may allow you to test different paths to purchase in different channels and change your channel mix. And obviously, I suppose, if you're let's say the leader of the marketing team, and you're looking after acquisition and retention, you've got the ability to perhaps understand, well, actually, what did we do last week that was different to the week before, or last month, or last year? Did our channel mix change a great deal? Have we done something differently? And then how has that affected my CLV? You could do it top down, you know, intuitively or indicatively. But yeah, what do you think? Do you think the same?
Yeah, my perception is that as long as you can rely on that attribution tool, I had a great conversation which just 2 weeks ago at an e-commerce conference in Greece with Russell McCarthy. So he stated that there are models, there are ways to model the data and to predict what is the marketing mix, so to nail the attribution. However, there are there are companies which are not using such tools, and they don't have enough data to predict what is the actual.
Yeah, you need a critical mass of data to make it relevant, right? Yeah.
So if you think about it, Rich, you have customers coming to your store. Let's do this analogy with the real store. What is the most important thing for you to increase sales and to have customers coming back to buy again? Knowing that they came from the second floor, or they came from the metro station, or they came from where they are coming from, or why they are buying the products. Because there are these
that this comes down to slightly the context of your positioning as a product and in the market. Again, first mover, disruptor, there's some of that will change that slightly. But I think, where and why are still really important. And I suppose you can see with a lot of CRM platforms that move into, I suppose, the ability to change the visual merchandising of a store based on perhaps your segment, right? If you look at the more Ferrari tools that are out there, right? They have the ability to perhaps say, well, I now know you are female, you're in my soulmate group, you're a brilliant customer. I'm going to show you the store, or some components of the store in a certain way that I know you'll like. Likewise, I know you're a guy, you're in my discount group. I'll give you access to the outlet in the store in the navigation of the store, perhaps, instead of it, you wouldn't see it as a soulmate. So that's really important. And that's, again, just being right message, right time to the right customer. I suppose the conversation we could have and sort of drill down or expand further on new customer acquisition via what and where, that feels much more variable and more complex to sort of unpack. But I'm thinking around on the CLV front, anything you can do to, I suppose, automate or scale that you've got, this is a returning customer and not a new visitor or a new customer. Yeah, it would be the first thing you would try and achieve for sure.
Yeah. And if you think about it, what's dramatically important is to have identifiable customers, because if they are not logged in, you can't do anything on their website experience. So you can't become relevant, and you can't address them that they are, let's say, former soulmates of your brand, which are now on your website
I mean, one of the things that I see, again, this is probably the slightly less sophisticated clients that we work with, or when we meet them, like display retargeting. So often, and this happens to me as a consumer, I'm quite a frequent, and I mean, maybe I'm a soulmate of a brand, and I get display retargeting like I'm a new customer. Hey, come back and buy. Hang on, don't talk to me like this. I've done 10 transactions with you in 2 years. You should be saying something else when you're following me around, right?
Mr. Customer, for being so loyal.
Yeah, and we've got some good tactics of how to leverage that media alone with returning or existing customers versus new ones. So you're absolutely right. Again, right message, right time, right customer. It can sound really overwhelming, because then you think, I've got to talk to every different customer differently. Don't start that way. Start with, I'll create 4, 8 customer groups. And create messages that work for them. And then when I get more sophisticated and it works, I then go to 20. It's like one brand to few instead of one to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. So, Rich, regarding this topic of let's say optimization, or having this type of mentality around and alignment around customer lifetime value, you've stated something important, that you need this type of alignment to happen. It's not only a marketing game; it's an operations, merchandising,
whole business, effectively. Nearly every part of the business.
Yeah. So how do you align this?
I think that idea. I imagine. Again, this is the approach maybe I would take, and the listeners and viewers may need to think about how they, the personalities and styles of the teams. But I imagine, thinking about the roles I've been in, I imagine if I showed that this is the calculation of CLV, it's a component of average spend over a period of time for customers, remove cost of goods and shipping. I imagine you'd hope, I know the individual that owns cost of goods, it's my product team or the product director. He now is a stakeholder of my number. Operations, shipping cost, now that's the operations team. And then obviously average revenue per customer, that's a combination. We said the frequency, which I can help on. but that comes down to like stock and pricing and basket sizes. I need my trading team or the e-commerce team or the individuals that run perhaps the commercial sort of trading calendar to be bought in. Just putting that on one slide in a meeting, say, right, I'm going to get 3 guys here, trading, operations, and product. How do we work together as a small group, share a piece once a month, and work on getting this number to from, like, say, 3, in terms of our CLV, or maybe your CLV is $100 or it's $500, but maybe you'd show that CAC LTV to CAC ratio. How do I get my CAC LTV ratio to go from 3 to 5? And then you work out, couldn't you? If I drop my cost of goods by 4% and my shipping cost by 5%, and I could get my AOV or average quarter spend up by 10, suddenly I've done this to CLV. And then how could you start that? So top down, design the target, and then work bottom up of what you could do to get there. And actually what's interesting, I suppose, for most businesses, if they're being measured, let's say, well, the product guy will already be thinking about how do I reduce my cost of goods while maintaining the quality of my product. The operations team, the same. How do I reduce costs of shipping and pick and pack while maintaining the quality of the output? And then likewise, the e-com guys are always going to be thinking, hey, I want to get my basket size bigger. I want to create greater average order value. And they're already doing it. It's just getting them together and seeing it through the lens of CLV and working together.
And prioritizing this properly, because in our course, in the CVO Academy, we have this framework of prioritizing things, because once you have the data, once you have the objectives, and once you have the teams, it's also a matter of being aware about your resources and your capacity to ship things in the next quarter or the other one. So that's how, if you don't prioritize based on your resources, how easy it is, how costly it is, what is the impact, the potential, and so on, you will end up chasing for the new shiny object, and it's not going to move the needle.
Yeah, it's just like you say, as we said right at the beginning, it should be a mandatory metric that's on the master dashboard trading front page of the trading pack every week or month that you review it. Absolutely, but it's really important. It's interesting to talk about stock. There's always an interesting thing, isn't there, that often, again, silo mentalities or silos can tend to group, and actually the CRM team, often when we see them, and I've managed them, tend to get isolated slightly because they're in the world of, I'm talking to customers already here. I don't have to be on the pulse of today's trading number. They're obviously thinking about, usually they're measured on delivery, success of email, open rate, click-through rate, and all those sort of things, but they maybe don't talk enough or actually consider, am I going to have enough stock to sell in 3-6 months time, right? It's really important that, again, that your CRM person or team are exposed across all the other functions of the business, and you don't sort of just leave them, just send more emails, guys. They need to be completely, as you say, collaborate with all the other teams in the business. It's absolutely key.
Yep. Rich, where can people find you? Because we are now at the end of this amazing episode.
That hour went really quick, didn't it? That was great. And well, thank you for having me on. And thanks. I've seen our web link come up on the screen. Yeah, we're at the Growth.Foundation. I'm on LinkedIn / you have this IN / Richard Chapple. So just type in Richard Chapple into LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm trying to create quite a bit of content around Order Rescue, our conversion rate tool. So please, listeners, come and find that, share it, comment on that. And thanks again for having me on the show.
You are more than welcome, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us, Rich. Hopefully, we will meet again in the future. Until then, thanks everyone for listening and for tuning in, and we'll see each other, of course, in the next episode.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.